your rhythm. So it's basically just for snare drum. Okay, so if you guys open on the first page of that book, okay, you're gonna find page, actually it says 37. No, sorry, yeah, the second page. Not the evil one, the second page. So it says page 37, but that's the old version of the book, it's 38. And that's basically to practice reading 8 notes and syncopation. You see a couple of rests there, so it's a fairly simple page. So I'm gonna play the first line very slowly. So this is the first line as written. Very, very simple. It's an exercise that it's great to play as written because it improves your counting, your reading, you get used to read rests, but it's very simple. So my problem was when I was studying this book many years ago, I got bored. So I didn't finish the book. This is a true story. I got bored. So at some point I just, nah, I'm gonna play drum beats. So I went to my drum beats books, like the funk drumming book and all that stuff, and I just focused on those guys. I got bored of it. It was just snare and bass drum. So one day I realized that I could change this. So what I started doing, for example, I turned this around. I'm going to play the first line again, but this time applied to the bass drum. I'm going to play a quarter note here instead of there. As you can see, the bass drum is keeping time on the book actually. It's always quarter notes in the bass drum. So I'm going to change that and play quarter notes. And play the snare drum part on the bass drum. And that, it was literally an epiphany moment. It was like, wait a second, I can work on this, many different ways. So that's today's masterclass. I'm going to try to. Last time I tried to talk about this, I think 8 different ways of approaching one bar. I've spent 45 minutes talking about one bar. So I'm going to try to be as I'll try to tackle all of them. If not, you guys get the message. It's up to you. So what I did next, again, the first line of this page was to work on the same thing, bass drum phrasing, but this time trying to keep it on top. So the first line, I'm not even playing the second. You know what? Right now you have, if you start, okay, I get what you're saying, and this will give me, this book suddenly becomes useful for like 20 years. This is one bar. So I can do the same thing with, one line, I can do the same thing with one bar only. So the first bar only, that I'll look at, I'll create a drum. I can play this bar over and over again. I can change the hi-hat button. So eventually, right now, coordination-wise, it's not possible, it's not super hard. It can be. If I change the hands bar, it can become quite challenging. So I can, a very simple funk, kind of Latin funk, kind of hi-hat phrasing. Start applying openings, so that makes coordination a bit hard. So change the whole thing on top, that's your rule. So On the page, you see what you have to play on the bass drum. What you do here, it's up to you. You can practice singles and play the bass drum. You know, the snare drum part on the bass drum. Practicing rudiments, but avoiding, in my opinion, boring. So basically, you can practice technique and reading at the same time. You can do the opposite. You can practice full ostinato and read that snare drum part on the snare. So let's say everybody knows I love the Syncopation. And I repeat this over and over again, never changes. I'll read the page. You can literally, this will avoid the boring. You will not get bored because you're focused on coordination and reading at the same time. If it's only reading, coordination is pretty challenging, at least for me, so it's pretty interesting. I can actually stay focused on that. But like technique, reading, once I get it, I get it. But I also know that it requires maintenance. But that's the tricky part, you know. When you actually know, you're learning that first line, you got it. What do you do next? You know what I mean? And that happened to me. I was like, well, done. But then, a couple of months later, I was trying, because I left it, I was trying to read again. I realized I required maintenance, but I was still struggling with the boredom part of it, you know? So I decided to do what I'm showing, adding stuff. So, some about reading the snare drum. That's a pretty big challenge. You can make it a bit faster. Anything to play your own pattern. It can be just singles. Right? It seems easy, but it took me a while to get these patterns down, even just singles. You can practice doubles with your feet while trying to read. Very little. Okay, got it. So, what I would do next, so we're going to use only the first line of this page, is I'm going to look at these notes as axes. Okay, so I'm going to play 16th notes all the time and then make that rhythm pop out using axes. Okay, so this is my pattern now. And those become accents. So I'm basically reading that but filling the gaps with 16 notes. Flying 16. So it sounds something like this, the first line. Same thing. Okay. Now there's another challenge. And of course you can read the whole page. Just showing the first line, but the idea is to practice your reading. Anyway, you're not trying to defeat the purpose of this book to improve your reading, your sight reading, so you know, I would play the whole page. Keep the quarter notes. page of the book. Okay? It's not hard to do what I just did. It takes some time. Now the next one, when I did this, so I practiced this, I was literally struggling, but I realized one thing, especially with this page. All my accents are falling on my strong hand, right? So you both left-handed, that means left. But all my accents were played with my right hand. So that for me was like, what about my left hand? So, it took me a while to get there, but I realized if I use triplets, that will force my beat to change. Triplets is 3 notes per count. I only have 2 hands, so, you know. So how did I change these to triplets? I started looking at these as a swing kind of phrase. So for example, looking again, let's look at the first one. I have 8th note, quarter note, 8th note, quarter note, quarter note. So for me, before I finish this sentence, I need to say that the swing pattern, the jazz right pattern, traditionally is written as a quarter note, 2 8th notes, quarter note, 2 8th notes, like straight 8th notes. That's how it appears on the score. But obviously it's meant to be swung, so it's not gonna sound like this. It's straight 8th notes. That's how it is actually, how it's written. But you already know because jazz, you need to swing those 8th notes. Knowing that, I applied the same idea. So for me, first bar becomes this. First note of the triplets, last note of the triplet. Okay, ba, ba. And then last note of the triplet of 2. So 2 and that's the 8th note. And then quarter note. Okay, so that first bar becomes this. Instead of this, as written, it sounds like this. That's what's written. If I swing the 8th notes, it sounds like this. So the difference is, now I can start practicing my jazz phrase. But before that, I try to fill the gaps playing triplets. So same thing, I will apply accents. The accent, right? So again. Okay, I know this is not easy because it's not written, but is it making sense? What I'm doing is I'm filling the gaps. So first I did that with 16th notes, so it's straight. And now I'm filling the gaps but with triplets, so I'm swinging the accents. Okay? So immediately, because it sounded so swingy to me, I realized, I can practice my jazz phrasing, my swing phrasing for all that matters, for blues, jazz, whatever requires swing, using this idea. So okay, sounds pretty cool. So I started to play the accents on tones. Because now left and right are working, I can actually move around. Because with the 16th notes it would be something like, not very useful in the real world. When would I do a drum fill that sounds like this? It's okay, it's a rhythm, but it's not a very cool drum fill. So I did the same thing on the triplets one. But now I can actually use, so I'm going to use all my left accents fall there, all my right hand accents will fall there. Cloud song, snare drum plays the ghost notes. So let's see. First one. Bum, 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 bum. Right there already. play the second bar, it's going to sound something like this. So, boom, 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 boom. If I loop the second bar. Snare, toms. Another drum beat right there. And obviously, it's a drum fill right there. So the other thing that I started doing was to challenge my reading, because I didn't want to memorize each bar. That was for me like one of my first rules for myself was I don't want to memorize these exercises because I don't want to stop practicing my reading. So what I did was, for example, 3 bars of tempo, just keeping some time. Each bar being the drum fill. Okay, so it's going to sound something like this. Per bar, you actually have a 4-bar phrasing. So instead of 40 bars, you have 160 bars in practice. Suddenly this page became very interesting to me. Okay? So that toms thing that I was doing, because I'm such a geek, I've transcribed it. So turn the page. That's what I was playing. It's the same thing. Now it's everything's written. If you want to go home and check all the accents match the other rhythm of the other page, hopefully you will. Okay? So, again, this time looking at the whole thing right there. The first bar, as you can see, dum, dum, go, go. This page alone as a reading exercise is meant to. Now there's so many notes, it's very easy to miss one. Okay? So actually for me it's easier to imagine the triplets on this one. It's just follow the accents than reading the whole thing. So if it's harder, I like it. Because it makes me better. Okay? So, you know, for example the first 2 lines, it's going to sound something like this. Any questions? Okay, because I've talked a lot about how many ways did I mention already? Bass drum with the quarter note, so that's a good exercise to practice. Basically that one, the first one I showed, and you can do the same thing with triplets, swinging the bass drum. So going back to the first one, but adapting this to a triplet fill. With the quarter note. Straight. And a great exercise, again because I'm such a geek, is to play the same bar twice, one time straight, one time swing. So straight and then with swing. Keeping time. So as you can see, my speed is not changing, but the feeling is way. Also mentally I'm changing the way I'm feeling this quarter note pulse. So practice that with matching. Okay? And that way you're actually making your bass drum, your foot that plays the bass drum, being the left or the right, a bit more clever. Because that's the problem with bass drum control. It's not technique. It's because we don't practice. We spend hours doing stuff like this. We don't spend hours doing stuff like that. It's not gonna lie. That's exactly why the bass drum control usually is the biggest problem. Alright, so if we turn the page and we go to the accented 16th notes, it's also part of the syncopation. That's the page. So we practice those exercises as they are. Yeah. So first part is going to be like this. One has an accent on one. Very, very simple. Very good to work on your control, obviously, but it's super simple. That's first. So this page, you can do the whole thing that I did before, but I want to show you now the rudimental approach that I use for the syncopation. So this time, what I'm going to do actually is to change. You can obviously do the toms exercise and the crashes and cymbals exercise. Keep going, one bar each. This becomes interesting. Exercise to work on moving around. But you can do the same thing with toms, that part's okay, we got it from the first part of this lesson. Actually, speaking of first part of this lesson, does anyone have the time?
25 past.
35.
25.
Okay, so to practice rhythms, for example, I can use that first exercise, tuck it. But instead of playing an accent, I can play a different to the 30-second. That's very important. It's something the same or else that's not correct. Yeah, I'm using drag. I can play flaps, so that's going to be a right. Every time I see an accent, and it's not here, it's just some page that I've chosen. The syncopation book does have accents on the E's and the U's, so you're going to work also the weekend and apply the same idea. So imagine the accent on the E of one instead. So do the same. or not. Okay, so that's my rudimental approach. And then you can apply the drags, fiddles, flams to toms as well. So now you also move. So you do the first line. So it's basically, we have two things here. Changing the accent to another rhythm, to another ornament, or slash and moving around the drums. So that's the two very important things that I want you guys to understand about what I've done with this book in my mind through the years was I don't want to stay on the snare. That was it. That was the moment. I don't want to practice. I don't know, 70 pages of this. Whatever it is, it was boring. It was just sad. And to be fair, not very realistic. I realized that every time I was playing with a band or whatever, I needed to move on the toms. I wasn't comfortable. I was super okay here. But then every time I needed to go there, my phrasing was very weird. Because I could never figure out what to do. Is that? It's not, in this case, the more you have, the more confused you're going to be. So, like, 15 toms, it's not going to save you, it's going to bury you. Like, you're going to forget it. You're going to sound lame as hell. Because you're going to try to use all of them, it never makes sense. When you actually understand how to move around the toms, the more you have a different perspective, you look at it, the drum set, lens, because you're going to be like, okay, now I have more colors, not more stuff to hit. You know what I mean? Okay? And that for me happened. A lot of toms, but actually understanding how to use each one of them, I made rules for myself. So for example, first bar, because eventually what I do is I play 1, 2, 3, 4, and just go down. So I play 24 bars. 24 So for me it would be first bar, the accent goes on tom 1, second bar, tom 2. So it was very methodical. So because what I was aiming for was freedom, I had to be fair. It's never the other way around. It's never like the other day I heard, I'm not going to say because this video goes on YouTube, so but I saw a drummer, very well known, saying that the way he explores creativity is by going to his practice room and just bash away. Let it all out. And I was like, good for you, because that doesn't work for any human being. How can you be creative? What you do is going, alright, well, let's be creative. You do that for half an hour. How can you retain anything from what you just did? That's the problem with me. Like, how can you remember the great lick out of the 10 that sucked that you did half an hour ago? The last one, maybe. Okay, I like the last one, but not the one that was really, really good, but eventually forgot because it kept on just doing random stuff. I don't believe in creativity too much. I believe that we need to focus and create rules and guidelines. And then something happens. For example, the whole concept of let's change the syncopation beat. Why did that happen? Because I was going through it methodically, and then I faced the boredom. Oh god, that's so boring. But because I already knew these exercises, I was retaining them as concepts. Easy for me to transpose it to something else. Okay? So that's my advice for you guys. If you want to be creative, if you want to work on drum fills, if you want to work on drum solos, you need to look at ideas, you need to retain them, and then break them, then just when you go for it, you go for it. Not thinking about, okay, I'm gonna No, you're live on stage and playing in front of, it doesn't matter if it's 30 people or 30,000, never do stuff like this. Alright? So, like this, and now I'm going to pull off page 58, exercise B of the Syncopation. What? It's not going to go right, man. It's going to sound like an exercise. And worse, you're thinking. It's rule number 1 playing live, never think. Just go with it. That goes for anything. Something that you did that was awesome, who cares? Done. Something that you did that messed up, you did a mistake,